There's a dark explanation for why Gary doesn't speak, but what's this about Gary not speaking? You see, friends, the origin of SpongeBob's story is one that wasn't told to the public because of how disturbing it could be for everyone. This origin explains why sea creatures can talk and interact as well as how it exists. SpongeBob, Patrick, Sandy, Mr. Krabs, and Bikini Bottom's residents. But there are some characters who, unlike them, don't speak, and as we said at the beginning of the video, there's a big explanation for this. Get ready. After this video, you'll never see SpongeBob the same way again. This official hidden origin of SpongeBob was meant to be revealed to everyone. But the truth is that the idea sounded pretty disturbing, and that's why they decided to hide it. Bikini Bottom is named not for bikinis or swimsuits, but because the island it's based on actually exists. In real life, a lot of nuclear bombs were detonated there. In real life, it's called Bikini Atoll, and if you ever think about going there for a radioactive vacation, you can find it in the Pacific Ocean, just 30 days of non-stop sailing by boat from Mexico. In case you're wondering, about 23 nuclear bombs were detonated on this island. This isn't just made up. Friends, these are the voice actors for Plankton, Mr. Lawrence, and Squidward, Roger Bumpass. At one point, they confirmed that this story was indeed 100% real in the story of SpongeBob. But the writers dropped this idea to avoid ruining anyone's childhood. Now we all know. The characters in Bikini Bottom are fish and sea creatures affected by radiation from the 23 bombs. But why doesn't this answer all our questions about the other sea characters in SpongeBob? How is it that only some species can talk? Why don't the jellyfish talk? Or what about the sea bear? Maybe you've noticed, but all the animals that didn't mutate just act like regular pets or wild animals. But didn't the radiation affect everyone equally? Well, yes, but the ones who were most affected were those who were near where these radioactive bombs exploded. So the other animals were only exposed to a little or almost none of the radiation, so they didn't undergo a complete mutation. Returning to the video's main question, Gary didn't get off without consequences. Radioactive, yes, he was exposed to radiation, but not enough to make him talk. This would explain why it seems that Gary's intelligence is sometimes much higher than Bob's own intelligence. Gary the Sponge reasons more than Bob himself. We can even see this in the episode where SpongeBob enters Gary's dream. The snail says that in dreams, you can do anything because there are no limits. But the way Gary speaks is quite intellectual, and even makes SpongeBob look like a fool. This occurs after reading something SpongeBob didn't get. If Gary could talk, he would have been a true philosopher and illustrator. Seriously, guys, I don't think this dream is the kind of dream you would ever have. For example, fur seals or jellyfish, as these creatures appear entirely wild. Which tells us that there is no trace of radiation inside them. They lacked mutations, so they didn't evolve or gain intelligence beyond basic survival and instinct. But here we find another conflict, and it has to do with the snails. Not all snails are just simple, silent pets. In the episode, Have You Seen This Snail?, Gary meets several stray snails. And remember, all these snails talk and even seem to have consciousness. These snails were probably present when the radiation concentrated in this area of Bikini Bottom. There's actually an episode, Wild Friends, that explains in more detail that I'm not crazy. And in this episode, which is so curious and a bit bizarre, a strange moon called Neptune's moon rises every 100 years, turning everyone in Bikini Bottom into wild animals. But only Sandy isn't affected by this change. They turn into animals that can't speak and revert to their natural form. I mean, we no longer see them standing on two fins, and they don't talk anymore. What's most disturbing is that they start attacking and eating each other just as they would in their natural habitat. Even their sense of shame disappears, because now they're all naked. But then why doesn't Aranita transform? It's simple. She doesn't belong to the underwater world. Squidward becomes a giant shiny octopus, and Pearl transforms into a huge naked whale. and SpongeBob and Patrick take on their real forms, and we even see SpongeBob feeding through his sponge pores just like real sea sponges do. Something he hadn't done since his butt burst into cubes. And this, my friends, explains quite a few things to us. So, does that mean all the residents of Bikini Bottom were like this before they came and blew everything up and started to mutate? At least they mutated with intelligence and could speak. In fact, there's a hidden detail they left us in Bikini Bottom about these Bikini Atoll bombs. It was the episode where Bob Esponja tried to give Squidward a pie, but Squidward thought it would explode. If you look closely, the realistic pie bomb explosion is actually footage of a real explosion at Bikini Atoll. Those with a sharp eye and historical knowledge probably noticed this. So friends, could this explain why some sea creatures in SpongeBob don't talk? Gary isn't dumb or just a simple pet. He might even be smarter than SpongeBob and Patrick put together if he could talk. So all the other creatures that survived the explosions gradually adapted to their new way of life. I'm really curious, how did they realize they needed clothes? Did they just figure it out? They built their civilization from the trash dumped on the island. Did they wear clothes because they saw photos of humans in clothes? Besides, friends, like they showed us in the episode of Wild Friends, in their true form, they had no need for clothes and felt no embarrassment about their own nakedness. After transforming into mutated fish, they instantly felt shame, just like Dan and Eve. But anyway, of course, the story of how Bikini Bottom was created, according to the writers, had to do with all the creatures of Bikini Bottom being the only surviving species. It all makes sense. They just happened to be part of the bomb tests. What do you think of this theory? Does it make sense to you? How else do you explain why some animals talk while others don't? We'll read your comments.